I'm a weak man. Ooh, man, you are strong. Yeah. I'm a weak man. Ooh, still I belong. Yeah. Your grace is enough. Your grace is enough. I'm a weak man, but you lift me up. I'm a weak man.
Okay, so welcome back to the Weak Man Podcast. As I stated in previous episodes, really the purpose for this podcast is to create, just a platform where men can hear stories of kind of faith journeys, as well as a platform where men can see other men be vulnerable. And some of the stories that I've shared previously were more prodigal son stories, where men have kind of drifted away from the faith and then found their way back. But this will be a slightly different conversation. So my guest today is Josiah Alway or
Yes,
Alway.
Alway.
Alway. Okay, so just how
This is how it's spelled.
So Josiah, thank you for taking the time out today. This conversation almost didn't happen. We've had to fight some major technical difficulties, but here we are. We're I feel like as we discussed, that any time that you're trying to spread the good news of the gospel, that there's going to be opposition.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you'll maybe talk some about what you've experienced in your ministry on that. But just going to kind of give the floor to you and let you introduce yourself, and we'll see where the conversation takes us.
Yeah, it sounds good. Well, so excited to be here. This is great. So I am an evangelist with Campaign for Christ International, and that's one of the several of the hats that I wear, but that's my main one. And our ministry, our main focus is evangelism, and we do medical missions and evangelistic campaigns mainly throughout Central America. We'll do events here in the States, and we have a sort of a branch for our military ministry that focuses in Pakistan. But for the most part, we travel mainly to Mexico, Guatemala, South America, Ecuador, and preaching the gospel, helping people physically. Kind of an example is we'll set up a tent, and during the day we'll have medical missions, doctors, nurses, and then at early evening we'll take all the medical equipment out of the tent, and then we'll set up chairs, a stage, and we'll have a service. So we're helping people both physically and spiritually, and hosted by local churches that can disciple new converts. And it's an amazing honor and privilege to be able to serve the Lord. And we were talking earlier, you were kind of mentioning about the prodigal, how many times we focus on those kind of stories.
Right.
My story is definitely quite a bit different than that. My parents were missionaries in Guatemala, Central America, and while they were missionaries there, my brothers and I were born there, and they're originally from Michigan. But when they returned to the United States when I was 5, and so I have been was born in the mission field and raised most of my life a pastor's kid. And when people kind of think about those who are raised in the church and remained in the church, it's not usually the exciting story that you were talking about earlier. Actually, before recording, we were discussing that, and but at around the age of 16 is when I really felt the call to go into ministry, and that was never my desire growing up. The one thing I will say, being raised in the church, I think there is a, I guess you could say this sense where you can become immune to your environment. I think when that's all you've known, and which is why I think a lot of people leave the church and or just never want to follow in the footsteps of their parents. But in my case, I had the amazing privilege of being raised by parents. My dad, who, when I saw him preach pretty much every Sunday, what he preached, he lived, or he would preach something that he wanted to be living out. And so a lot of pastors' kids or people raised in the church, sometimes they can see hypocrisy or he just preached a sermon, but I know he's not like that. But that wasn't the case with me. I had amazing parents who I could see what what my dad was preaching, that's how we lived at home.
Yeah.
So that I had a great experience as a pastor's kid, but still didn't really feel the desire, if you will, to go into ministry. But then at 16, out of nowhere, it was late at night. My parents were already in bed. The house was dark. I was in my room and just felt God's presence come. And here I am, a 16-year-old with no desire for ministry. And I find myself just laying on the floor and just weeping in God's presence. And just the best I could describe it is just suddenly there was just this something put inside of me where I felt like I needed to preach the gospel. And that's kind of long story short, that's how I ended up here in ministry from that one experience.
And again, like we talked about, I think these are the stories that also need to be told. And I think that there's a time and a place for the prodigal son story.
Absolutely.
That can speak to that person that has, strayed away. But also, I think that we need to celebrate when, your faith is endured, right? And
right.
So 16 years old, you feel like you were called to ministry.
Yeah.
And then how old are you today?
I'm going to turn 32 next week.
Okay.
So
wow.
Yeah.
So the second half of your life has been in ministry essentially. So
and
walk me through what that looks like and how you got to, where you are now. Yeah.
So from that point at 16, I started first doing street evangelism. So I started walking up to people, giving them gospel tracts, witnessing in the street. So certainly didn't go right into full-time ministry from that. I went into full-time ministry in 2019. But years of just ministering in the street and I worked a secular job but then God opened the doors and then we started this ministry where we're able to travel and preach the gospel behind the pulpit, but I still do street evangelism. Okay. I think that's super important.
So I feel like there's probably a way, deeper story about how this ministry got started.
Yeah.
There's been provision of God and opening and things being, that happened that you could have never imagined.
Oh yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, we went on a mission trip. This must've been 2018, 2017. And, on this particular mission trip, we had a church, hosting a medical clinic. It's very common in poorer communities where you can help people's physical and spiritual needs. And so this doctor, I got to know him, became friends with him. And, down the road, I eventually said like, hey, would you be interested in starting a ministry? And you run the medical mission side, and I feel called to be an evangelist. Well, when you think about a doctor that's going to quit a secular job and go into ministry, that's a huge deal. He was a doctor in Honduras, in Latin America, and he was working at a hospital at the time, and he had felt very much called to use his education for the glory of God. And so he agreed to it. We were able to get, talk about a pay cut from going to a doctor into full-time ministry, but he was willing to do that. And Dr. Fidel Reyes is his name, and huge sacrifice that he made. And I also had a huge pay cut. I was actually working in politics at the time. That was my career. I picked the two most controversial careers, politics and religion, which are the two things you're not supposed to talk about.
Right.
And thankfully, we got married the year I went into full-time ministry, and my wife is a labor and delivery nurse. And so she was able to supplement her income for the first couple of years. And, now she's a stay-at-home mom we have four boys, 5 and under. So but at the time when we needed extra income, she was able to help with that. And, so we've been in this together from the start, but, the Lord has provided miraculously. When we started, we didn't know where we were going to get income. We really didn't have a plan. We just knew it was God's will. And, we had just enough to survive on, both, me and Dr. Reyes, and the Lord has just opened doors and churches have supported. And, I think when you're in the will of God, he provides, and it's just a matter of trusting him in obedience.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel like we were just talking about
that
too.
Yeah.
Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2.